Welcome to The Pew, the place where everyday guys talk about everyday things in front of the one person who can do something about it, Jesus Christ. Now here's your host, just a guy in the pew, John Edwards.
Well, welcome back to The Pew, everybody. I'm your host, John Edwards, and man, am I excited to be joining you for another episode of Just a Guy in the Pew this week. And this week, I've got a guest joining us. I have been talking to him about coming on here for the last couple of years. He's a super busy guy, and with our schedule, sometimes it's hard to make things happen, but we are blessed to be joined today by a guy I met several years ago, have developed a friendship with, who's got an incredible story, has been involved in a lot of things in his life. His name is Sam Blair. I want to tell you a little bit about him before I bring him on. Sam is a former Navy SEAL officer with over a decade of experience leading the most elite teams around the globe. After holding leadership positions on multiple SEAL teams, he taught leadership and ethics at the United States Naval Academy and helped screen, select the next generation of future SEAL officers. Sam has traveled to over 50 countries and has been deployed to Africa, the Middle East. Before transitioning from active duty, Sam was a SkillBridge Fellow at Squadra Ventures, a venture capital firm in Baltimore. Sam is currently the CEO and co-founder of Valletta Industries, a defense contract company focused primarily on providing tactical and security to the Department of Defense and three-letter agencies. He holds an MBA from Cornell University and has an undergraduate degree in theology from the Franciscan University of Steubenville. Sam and his beautiful wife and their 4 children are proud parishioners of St. Peter's Parish in Covington, Louisiana. So without further ado, folks, I want to bring up my good friend, Sam Blair. Sam, it's great to be with you, buddy. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be in the pew with you. So I guess we're guys in the pew today.
That's right. Yeah, we are, man. That's the thing, man. All of us are. We're all trying to be better, right? We're all trying to get close to the Lord and grow in our faith. And I know that's something that I'm excited to talk to you about. I know you've had a great journey in your life, and there's all the Navy SEAL stuff. And I know you've talked probably until you're blue in the face about, the hardness of some of those things and the difficulties of becoming a SEAL. And we'll talk about a little bit of that. But, one thing you and I discussed as we were talking about doing this was kind of, revealing the man behind all those things. And there's an issue, I don't want to say an issue, but there's a tendency when people hear SEAL, like they just feel like, okay, this guy is unbreakable. He can kill you like 72 ways from Sunday. He's probably the toughest man in the universe with no feelings, no emotions, and he must be like a robot that's indestructible. And I mean, I would say that's probably not true, right, Sam? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, one, some of the guys that I had the honor and pleasure of serving with are some of the funniest, down-to-earth human beings, and some of my closest friends, and they put pants on just like you and me, and they have emotions. Emotions are good, but at the end of the day, we're all humans. Could they kill you 72 different ways? Maybe more, but they're tough guys for sure. But some of the best family men, some of the best fathers, and look, just like all of us, we have struggles for sure. So I think there's no Rambos in the spiritual life. There's no John Waynes in the spiritual life. I think Western culture definitely portrays what it is a man should be. And I think our faith, there's the whole journey that we go through. And I want to maybe unpack that a little bit more. But the spiritual life and what the world tells us a man is, that journey is it's opposed to one another, for sure.
Yeah. No, it definitely is, man. I'm sure it is. I can't imagine what it's like to be in those positions, to go through all that training, to be, so tough and have all that stuff going on, and all the things you have to go through to be in the armed services, just from the beginning, but let alone when you get into the elite teams, like the SEALs and the Rangers and things like that, and the stuff that they put you through. And like I said, I mean, people hear Navy SEAL and they just assume that you're fearless, confident, unbreakable. And, so what I kind of wanted to start off here with is, yeah, like the training was there, and we've all seen movies, we've all heard, different SEALs and people talking about all that. There's all kind of guys with podcasts. There are former SEALs that have talked about all the difficulty of the buds and training. But what I wanted to know was like, one of the first things I want to ask you about was what's one of the most humbling moments of weakness that you faced that like no one would expect probably from a guy that's been through the things like that you have.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the stories on buds and teams, it's kind of saturated at this point. There's a lot of lessons to learn for sure, and I think I'm grateful that some of those lessons can be integrated into society if it's going to help an individual improve on efficiencies and being a better person. I'm all about that. But in terms of your question, right? I think there is a hype where you get told, hey, you're a Navy SEAL, and people pat you on the back and say, hey, thanks for your service. And, and a lot of times I just want to tell them, like, I really appreciate it, but I also thank you for paying your taxes because I've loved every minute of this. But then, part of the humility and the weaknesses that you bump up against, those are all there and they're exposed in training, especially in buds. The design of that whole evolution is to expose and see, hey, where is the weakness in this guy, and how are they going to push through it? So everyone will fail at one point or another in the selection process, specifically buds. But beyond that, in terms of just the human component, I was listening to your episode with Paul George, and you guys were talking about the prodigal son. And, for a long period of my life as a cradle Catholic, I can see myself, in all three of those roles, as the father, as the prodigal son himself. But really I identify with the older brother. And when I was getting out of the military, I think that was probably the hardest part of my journey, because it exposed a ton of weaknesses, suboptimal strengths, if you will, getting out. And kind of pulling that thread a little bit. If you're cool with it, I'm going to ramble here for a minute, but
dude,
I'm going to answer your question.
This is your opportunity, man. Come on with it.
So, getting out of the military, I was talking to some buddies, and they're like, hey, Sam, getting out of the military is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I remember kind of laughing at them, like, come on, guys, don't be dramatic. I know your story. You're a combat Navy SEAL. It's not the hardest thing you've ever done. But I heard that a couple times. So it definitely gave me pause, but there was an element of pride. I think that I was going to stick the landing when I got out of the military. And my decision to get out was, I had a couple small kids at the time. Now I have got four kids. And deploying with kids was definitely a toll on the family. And it changed the mission for me. So I was like, all right, I'm going to off ramp. And for me, that was getting an MBA. That was going through the paces, like getting a fellowship. And I wanted to land in private equity, not because I even knew how to spell private equity back then, but because I was told that's where the most money is. And, all of my preparation kind of fell through on the 2-yard line, and I found myself scrambling. And we had already purchased a house. We were renovating the house. Kids are in Catholic school. So it really almost forced me into an entrepreneurial role to start a company. And then starting a company, the business needs money. So everything needs money at that point. And there's not a lot of money coming in as you're starting a new venture. And I just remember being stressed out of my mind, John, like, what is going on? And it was the first time in my life where I as a young man, I just kind of operated with, I was a faithful Catholic. I went to Sunday Mass. Sometimes I try and go to daily Mass. But I really put the Lord in kind of this Sunday focused relationship. And I didn't think he cared about anything other than me in my relationship with him on Sunday, and maybe reading the scripture here and there and talking about Jesus. But I didn't think he cared about taxes or understood how to run a business or, parent, all these things, which all false. But here I was, and I'd been rewarded my entire adult life for white knuckling everything and tenacity and, just if someone says no, you just like, all right, just face wash them and keep moving forward and just achieving your goals and objectives. And here I was, and I was floundering, what felt like the first time in my life. And I was like, Lord, what's going on here? Do you see this? Did you bring me out of the military just to embarrass me? And it was the first time I really pushed back on my relationship with the Lord. I was like, Lord, do you see this? And he answers those. In those moments, he responds quickly, because it was a very genuine. I mean, I had tears in my eyes. It was like early in the morning. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't sleeping for a couple of days, like trying to understand how I was going to navigate this situation. And he's like, I see it. I see you. But I'm not here to hold your beer, and I'm not here for you to just go like put me in, the downstairs basement when the Joneses come over and then bring me up when you want to talk about Jesus. It's like, I want to do everything with you. I want to be fully integrated into your life. And I care about business because that's where souls are. I care about education with your kids because that's where your kids are going to integrate with other souls. Like, I care about all of this. And I want to do life with you. I don't want to just be relegated to a Sunday relationship of 1 hour a week. I want all of you. And I know that sounds kind of like, but more than that, John, I think it was wrestling with, at least for me, it was the beginning of a multi-year wrestling match with the Lord, realizing that he's good, that he has plans for our welfare, not for our woe, and that he loves us. And I think you have to begin there before any of the spiritual life makes sense. And I think I was just kind of on autopilot in my faith. Like, yeah, God's good. I go to Sunday Mass. My grandparents say, hey, be Catholic. My parents said be Catholic. I went to Catholic school. I believe all this is real, but I'm just kind of like, what else is real? My 401k and like vacations and having a nice truck and all these things, that trying to play king of the mountain. And the Lord I guess, knocked all that over and just looked at me in the face and is like, do you think I'm good? Do you know that I love you? And it was one of those moments in life that demanded a response and a reaction. And I've just been that was 5 years ago. And it really set me on this course, because the prodigal son, when the older son is furious, he's like, you give the younger son all this, and I didn't even get a goat. And the father says, don't be angry. Like, all I have is yours. All I have is yours. This inheritance, everything. But it leaves the story stops there. We don't know how the older son responds. We don't know if he enjoys that feast with the father and his younger brother, or if he goes away mad. And I think the Lord was kind of looking at me like, all of this is yours. Like, I'm your inheritance, not your 401k, not your retirement, not your business, not the house you're remodeling. I'm your inheritance. I don't go like, and how do you want to respond to that, Sam? I was like, It was just this moment of like, I had to choose the next chapter, like the next move on the chessboard.
Well, hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the show this week. If you have been blessed by our ministry at all, I would humbly ask you to prayerfully consider becoming a monthly partner in the Pew by going to our website, justaguyinthepew.com, and clicking the donate button in the upper right corner. Your support will help us reach thousands more men through the podcast and through the life-changing groups we're starting for men in parishes all over the country and around the world. We can't do it without you, and every bit of your support helps. So please consider becoming a monthly partner in the Pew today. Thank you for your time and enjoy the episode. Dude, I love what you're talking about with the prodigal son, because I think it's something that we can all relate to, no matter if you've been a Navy SEAL or an accountant or like whatever, right? It's something that we all have to struggle with at some point in our life. We try to go our own way. We try to we try to do things without God. And you said something, it's a word I use a lot, which is white knuckling. And I imagine in your training, you were taught to be, not only depend on your brothers, but also be very self-sufficient, right? Like, to be able to survive in any circumstances and see to yourself. And a lot of times, I'm sure that can be difficult when you come out of the service, like you said, because you're in this self-reliance, right? Like, I've got to make a way. I've got to depend on myself. I've got to provide all this for my family. And it sounds like what God was saying to you is like, no, you got to depend on me. And I guess that's kind of one of the questions I was going to ask you anyway, but like what was harder, like buds or surrender to God in that way? Because I know that's something I still struggle with, is just I still want God to lay everything out in front of me and show me the money that's coming in from now until I'm 70, and know that I could pay for my kids' Catholic high school, which is more than college in a lot of ways, but that I could provide for all those things and do all that. And the hardest part for me sometimes is God being like, hey, do you believe I'm good? Like you said, do you trust me? And I think that's something that obviously you have to learn to do as you're building a team in the SEALs, right? You have to trust your buddies. They're going to be there for you, I would imagine. But also you have to kind of fight that self-reliance, after you get out. Because I often hear some military guys say, I've still got those relationships that I talk to, but a lot of times I find myself alone in my life. I don't have those people near. And so that's another thing that men are dealing with today, is a lot of isolation and loneliness. I imagine that's even more so when you've been, living for a number of years with brothers in arms and brothers in combat, and then you're out and kind of trying to build a life, and you're out here, on your own with your family trying to do that. So a couple things there: buds or surrender to God, and then just talking about this isolation and loneliness that I'm sure a lot of guys feel as they come out of the service.
Yeah, and I guess maybe just in order there, I'll talk about, I guess it's subjective, and everyone has their own experiences coming out of the military based on their experiences in the military, also their formation, their how they process information, how they move in the world. So this is, I guess, a unique take, because it's mine. Maybe there's some similarities, but I remember the first time that I got off that cadence of training. And when you're training, you're gone all the time, and then you deploy, and you're kind of just this almost like summer help at the home. Like my wife is a champion, and she has our household just on lockdown, just like most military wives they are phenomenal by and large. General statement, but by and large, just very impressive. Sure. And my wife is no exception. And I remember one time where things are settling down, and I have a steady, I'm at home, and we finished dinner, and I was, let's go to the park. I was like, okay. So we go down to this park in the neighborhood, and we're sitting down watching the kids on this playground, and we're in these Adirondack chairs. And I was probably sitting for maybe 5 minutes, and I just looked at my wife. I was like, what are we doing? She's like, we're just sitting here. I was like, I can't, what? I can't just sit here. So I got up, and I just left. I just walked away, and I thought I was, because I just was uncomfortable. I don't know how to explain. It's like I was just uncomfortable taking any rest. It didn't feel right or normal. And I also didn't think my wife was going to care either. She's just, because I was just always gone. I didn't know how to interact with my family, which might sound ridiculous, but it's accurate. And my wife came back from the park maybe an hour later, and she isn't one to shy away from confrontation, just read me the riot act. Like, what are you doing? I was like, what do you mean? It's like, you don't just walk away. Like, all we're doing is sitting. Like, the boys want to be with you. And it just was this aha moment. Like, that's not normal, that I can't just integrate with my family and relax. And it took a while, to just settle into family life, because I was just used to being on the road all the time, so that's a component of feeling almost out of touch with my own family. And so if that's the case, you can certainly, I was definitely closed off to talking to anyone at my kids' like sports events. They come up and like kind individuals, just trying to say like, hey man, how about those, whatever the sports team, or how about the weather? And I just like make it very clear to them, like, I don't want to talk to you. I just don't, I'm not here to associate or be friends. I have friends. I'm good. And it's not that I actually love people. And it just was a process, like a metamorphosis of coming out of the military. And that was my experience. I just was very closed off to my family, to people in my community. And part of that's also I'm introverted. There's that element. But there was some healing that had to take place. There was just some time and space. And I still have a lot of work to do there, but I think my family knows that, hey, I'm here for you. I love you. I want to be with you. And I do very much enjoy relaxing now with my family. I can carry on, a very surface conversation now with people on the sports field now and in my community. I do love, I love the community I'm in. Still working through that. But the piece that you talked about, what's harder, buds or surrender? And, physically, obviously, buds is going to be harder. But
Sure.
If you're going to pair the two up, honestly, the spiritual life is not easy if you actually want to pursue the Lord as He's calling each of us to pursue Him, which is to be excellent. He's not letting us off the hook. And it's not like, sure, He can meet us in our brokenness. He can meet us where we're at, no doubt. But he's also not pulling any punches. Like, He is calling us to be perfect as His Heavenly Father is perfect. And that also means like a full-on pursuit. So if you're trying to make any strides in the spiritual life, one, holiness is the Lord's work. It's not your own work. So you can't grasp the spiritual life and white knuckle and say, no, I want to be a saint. Part of that is it's cooperation with grace, which means surrender, which means for men, that's the wrestling match, because all of us have core questions like, am I going to be okay? Am I safe? For my core question is, Lord, are you good? Because if the Lord is good, then you can start looking at this reality, which is foundational to the spiritual life, which is surrender, which does not come natural to any man with testicles. And it certainly doesn't come natural to a veteran. It doesn't come natural to a Western male. It's all countercultural. So if you're going to make any strides in the spiritual life, it comes down to surrender. And we want it all. We want to have. There's a lot to say there, but I'll pause there because I've been talking. But surrender.
It is, and it's hard to do, and it's something like that's what I often talk to men about. Is like, guys will say, well, John, I've been baptized, I've been confirmed, like I'm in, like, right, and it's like, well, no, you've walked into the foyer of the house. Right, like but you haven't gone into the other rooms. Like Jesus, you've let Jesus into that foyer, but He wants to go in those other rooms. He wants to go into that brokenness. He wants to open that closet door where you got shoved everything when you saw Him pull in the driveway, right? Because you don't want to show Him a mess. But that's what He wants to enter into. And oftentimes, you're right, that is the hardest thing, because I was never in the military. I was never in the service, but I was certainly raised by a father that was just like, a man doesn't need anybody or anything. Like, if you can't figure it out, keep doing it until you figure it out. And don't ask anybody for help or you're not a man. And like, feelings, what are feelings? Like, it's just, that was the way I was raised. So, surrender to me was a bad word. Like, it was just like, that means I'm not enough. That means I'm not good enough, and I never will be. And that's where I think the devil's sort of gotten into the heads of so many men, is that surrender has become a bad word for a lot of men, like you're saying. But if you look at it from the gospel perspective and you look at it from what God says, and I've got a relic here of St. Paul on the table. St. Paul talks about, asking God to pull the thorn from his side 3 times. And God says, no, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And so, like, surrender isn't giving up. It's giving in to the Lord, like saying that I don't have to, I'm not giving up. But what I am realizing is that there's a God and I'm not Him, and I've got to have His help. And it sounds like you started to hear some of that, after you got out, was, the military kind of taught you strength. I don't want to speak for you, but from what I'm gathering from what you said, like, strength is a lot of self-reliance and being able to do things without having to depend on anybody. If you do, you've got a team to depend on. But in some regard, having that ultimate self-reliance, and that's what strength is. And I think what God tries to show us is that true strength is in the ability to let go, right? To admit that you can't handle everything and that you don't have it all figured out and that you do need help. And that's the hardest part for so many men. And I had a quote here that I thought might come up today, and I think it is in this moment. It's from Padre Pio, and he says, God's mercy is infinite. but he asked that we recognize our misery. Like he asked that we recognize our struggles and where we need help and invite him into that. I also heard somebody brought a saint up yesterday that was talking about God wants to give us many gifts, but the problem is our hands are full. We're trying to hold on to everything. And I think that, that's some of the things I'm picking up from what you're saying there, is just that it could be the struggle, that surrender can be such a buzzword in a bad way for a lot of men.
100%, man. And I think it makes it that much more painful too when the Lord has to get your attention as a man, because for me, I'll just speak to my own experiences. That wrestling match was very rough, and all this. I won't get on like a ton of detail, but like just the stripping away, really, of just the pride. Where in so many ways, the Lord showed me, He's like, I need your attention, and in that wrestling match, it was just showing like, look, I am God, you're not. I'm big, you're little, and that's tough. Like I've got an Ivy League MBA, and I was a Navy SEAL officer, blah blah blah. And the Lord's like, yeah, great. I'm big, you're little, and
who gave you all those gifts?
Right? I want to father you, and it's like, oh, it's like, well, I'm in my at this point, I'm in my late 30s. I'm good. He's like, no. I want to father you. I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Yeah. And and that's when the whole journey began for me. And it doesn't stop. That's the other thing, is what I love about the pursuit of following the Lord. It's not, hey, the Lord's my, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, and now I put my feet up. It's like, man, this journey doesn't stop. It really does not stop. Like He is calling us to be saints. And there is a perfection that happens along the way because we're being stripped and purified, and that's not fun, dude. It's not easy, but it is. It's an incredible journey. These are lessons I don't want to learn again, but I wouldn't. I'm so grateful for them. I'm so grateful for them.
Well, what is fathering by God look like in your life? Like, what are some examples of that where you can like say, man, this was a moment where God fathered me, or where I had something that I might have had to go through that was difficult, but He was there with me the whole time. Like, what does being fathered by God look like in some of your story?
I think there's a lot to tell there, but I think part of it is just showing that He's aware of my physical, spiritual, mental, He's aware of my needs, to include finances. Like He's like, yeah, I know that you have a house. I know you have a mortgage, Sam. I know that you have a wife. I know you have kids. I'm going to take care of you. I was like, okay. And also just this understanding, like, I'm not an orphan. I don't have to go around just grasping at everything. He's like, I will provide for you. It's not about the finance. I'll take care of all that. I'll take care of your kids' education. I'm going to take care of you. But I want you to focus on me, and I want your family with me in heaven. I want you to help get your wife and your kids to heaven. That is your mission, not to become a billionaire, and if that happens, awesome. But He's like, I want you to know you are loved. And He's shown me that in so many different ways, that His love for me. Most recently, I'll just share this. I was rereading. I love King David and just his story. I think there's just so much to take out of that. But I was reading 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 14. So my birthday is July 14th. And just kind of taking this whole wrestling match to fruition, 2 Samuel, so my name's Samuel, the new Samuel, if you will. My birthday, chapter 7, verse 14, July 14th. And that verse, I don't have it in front of me, but it's essentially, I will be your father, you will be my son. I was like, boom. I mean, I don't think I've ever been hit so hard by a scripture verse before in my life. And I think I reread that thing multiple times in the morning, drinking coffee. Like, wait, how did I miss that at?
What an incredible gift. Yeah.
Yeah. Just so that's like one, I guess, answer to your question. He's just like, I love you. And that's not just this general statement. It's a real thing. It's not just a second grade Jesus loves you. And you're like, all right, great, thanks. And now I got to go do life by myself. It's like, no, he loves you and he wants to be with you in everything you're doing.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I think that's such a gift to hear that from a guy that's been through all the things you have, and like I said, all the not only the training, but just the battle and the the wartime stuff that you've seen and all that. To hear this from somebody like you is I think an amazing gift for people, and it makes me think of Romans 8:15, I think it is. I may get this wrong, people, but you can Google what I say. But you do not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but a spirit of adoption, right? And I think that's something that has always spoken to me. It's like, man, like you're fearing, but you forget that you're mine, right? Like this is the whole thing. And someone once said to me, like, if your identity comes from what you do, it'll collapse. Like you'll collapse. And I think that's something that so many people we struggle with today, whether you're a former Navy SEAL or, a CEO of a company that's in defense, or somebody that's an accountant or somebody that's in ministry, whatever it is. If your identity comes from what you do instead of whose you are, you're always going to struggle and you're always going to fail. And especially if you're trying to turn always inward back on yourself to try to do that, because Catechism says the dignity of the human person is rooted in his creation in the image and likeness of God. And that's something that so many men forget, right? We just, and we can get in those places when we struggle too, Sam. I don't know about you, but like, you can kind of feel like sometimes God's mercy, God's grace, God's love, God's adoption is for everybody else but you. I don't know if you've ever felt like that, but I know I certainly have in my life.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you were talking to Paul about, that scripture verse when, everyone's going out to the fields and you got the guy starting at like 8 a.m. and he's getting paid the same as the laborer who, started 30 minutes later and it's like 5 p.m. and payday comes, at 5:30 p.m. And you're sitting there laboring like, wait, he's getting paid the same? I want to get to a position in my walk with the Lord where I'm so excited, being a cradle Catholic, to tell everyone like, guys, you can get there. He's going to pay, get to heaven. And because you're right. I think I've had an attitude of like, man, I'm laboring over here and look at this guy, look at this guy. And you see that with the disciples too, right after the resurrection. You see that healing process that needed to take place between Peter and our Lord. And before they go through the whole agape, feed my sheep 3 times, Peter looks at John and he's like, what about this guy? What about him? And the Lord's like, whoa, don't look over there. Like, this is between you and me. Like, don't worry about that guy. And he has to like bring Peter's attention back into focus. It's like, you have a mission and I'm calling you to do specific things. Don't worry about John or your brother Andrew. Like, I want to know, are you repentant? Cool. Okay. Now I've got a huge mission for you. Feed my sheep, and he goes on to be the first pontiff. And St. John goes on to be a great saint and a gospel writer. Like, everyone has specific gifts and talents and a mission. And I think the more we can understand that the Lord loves us, I think from that place we can start our mission. Like, we can't actually go on mission until we know that. I think we're just glorified social workers, spinning our wheels, unless you actually know that you're loved by the Father.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's what drives what we do here. Like, there were so many times at the beginning I wanted to quit just because I'm like, I don't have a theology degree. I haven't been to seminary. I don't, like, the Lord, you're asking me to do all this. And I'm not Father Mike Schmitz. I'm not Scott Hahn. I'm not, Chris Stefanik. I'm not. And the Lord's like, yeah, I know. I made you. I know you're not any of those people. Like, right? I know you're not. I made them to do what they're doing, but there's a specific path for you. But you can't do it if you don't believe that you are who I say you are. Right. And that's really the thing, is that in life, like, I can go to my wife and I can complain about the way I feel. And certainly we talk about those things and she talks about that with me. I've got my men's group that I can go and the brotherhood I have there to hold me accountable and all those things. But like, ultimately, nothing's going to fall into place until I believe that God is who he says he is, and I believe that I am who he says I am. And when that comes, like, that's what I'm trying to teach my 16-year-old son right now. It's like, it doesn't matter what anybody has to say about you. Me, your mother, your sisters, your friends, your teachers. What matters is what God is saying to you, what God thinks of you, what God believes about you, and what you believe about God. And when we get that right, and I think this is the fundamental thing that people still struggle with. We're out here arguing about what mass we should be doing, and like whether the Pope said something that was correct or not, or heretical, or if it was, liberal or conservative and all. It's like, no, where's your relationship with God right now? Like, that's what matters, because all you could control is your 10-foot radius. And we worry about so many other things because the enemy knows, if I can keep you distracted, right? I mean, to put it in military terms, I mean, I'm sure the enemy loves to build distractions to get your attention over here. Meanwhile, they're flanking you over here because you were paying attention to the wrong thing. And like, that's the same thing the devil does. If he can get your attention off of the one thing that matters, your identity, then you're going to struggle in everything else you do. When your wife comes in and says, hey, why didn't you take the trash out? Oh, well, I'm lazy and I'm not a good person because I didn't take the trash out. Or your son says, Dad, you didn't call me last night. Well, I'm not a good father. Or, these are the things where the enemy gets in so quickly if we're not careful. And we have to have that shorn up. Now, you do that through having brotherhood, by having, so many other things too, by being tied to the sacraments and just continuing to preach the truth to yourself, as St. Paul says. But I think you're right. That's where a lot of people really struggle, is in their identity. And guess what? When you struggle in that, what do you start to do? You start to isolate and you start to pull back because you don't think you're good enough. And that's exactly where the devil wants you.
Yeah, man. I think that core identity, especially for men that have, father, husband, father, and we're called to love in those domains. Well, if we don't have the sonship tight, if we don't understand that we're a beloved son, that divine sonship, we cannot love our wives well or to the fullness, right? And we can't love our children to the fullness if we don't understand how to be loved ourselves. And I think that's really the wrestling match that happened in my life was, and I still have a lot to learn. I'm by no means like I've arrived. It's still a journey, but this idea that, wow, I am a child of God and I'm loved, that changes everything. It changes everything. And I want to be close to the sacraments because that's where I encounter the triune living God, the unmoved mover, and therefore I can love my wife well or better. And I can strive to love my children better. I can love my neighbor and my brothers better, only by knowing first and foremost that I'm loved. And I think the other thing that you're hitting on, which is so interesting, that kind of parallels the both the spiritual life and the reality on the ground, is if you look at any tactic going back, this isn't like anything mind-blowing. This goes back to antiquity, is if you want to take out an enemy, it's isolate and contain them. It's like you cut off supplies, you cut off resources, you cut off intelligence, and now they're alone. Like where are we going to get attacked from? And then you can come in and on your terms systematically destroy the enemy. Well, you flip that, getting out of the military, it's like, oh my gosh, guys everywhere are getting maneuvered on. They're getting isolated and contained by the enemy. And why is that? Well, the men, I think a lot of guys think Father Mike Schmitz or Chris Stefanik or Bishop Barron are going to carry the day for the Catholic Church. It's like, no, every one of these men are leaders in their domestic churches, and their wives and their children need them to step into the breach and say, look, I am going to take my prayer life seriously. I'm going to take the pursuit of virtue seriously. I am going to take staying close to the Lord in the sacraments seriously and lead a sacramental life, because I want to defend the holiness and the peace of the domestic church and my community. And that isn't Bishop Barron's job. That's not your local parish priest's job. And in order for men to actually come into their roles, they have to know that they're loved and that they have a mission. and they can name their mission, the name of their wife, the name of their children. They have a very clear and specific mission. And not only that, they are called to sanctity. Sanctity is not just reserved for someone that has a nonprofit out in the world and trying to preach the gospel. If you're a CEO of a bank or a lawyer or construction worker, like, you are also called to be saint. Mm-hmm. You have a mission. And guess what? You also have access and placement that your parish priest and your archbishop do not have. You are called to preach the good news to your coworkers, to your neighbors, to your colleagues, to your old high school buddies. You have a specific mission, and you have gifts and talents to do that mission. And it's not just on a few. It's not just, we're not just, you say a man in the pew. It's not a man in the bleachers, and I'm parroting that, but I love that. That's not mine, but there is active, like, we are called to have an active role as Catholic men, and the church, she needs her sons engaged, man.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think this is the ploy of the devil. He wants the men isolated and alone. You see the effect it's had on the world and families. And, men will say, well, why does everybody think I'm toxic? Because, there's just all this stuff in the world that's an attack on the family, and the devil throws the spear at the head of the family, right? I mean, that's who he wants to take out first. And that's why men are so important. And, I have a lot of friends that were in the military, and they talk about, like, this isolation a lot. They'll say, like, not just from what they're witnessing, but in their own life. They're like, man, I was talking to a guy one day at a conference that we've now become good friends, and we've talked about this stuff a lot. But he said, man, it was so much easier to find brotherhood in war than it is in the church, than it is to come out of war and in the church. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I got home and, trying to build a life, and there's not a lot of places in parishes where men are going and finding brotherhood. There's not a lot of places where men can come and get real. And he said, my brothers, when we were in the services, he's like, when we talked about real things, we didn't just talk about who could kick in the door the best or who could, shoot somebody from 1,000 yards. We talked about, like, what we were dealing with, our fears, our struggles, our difficulties, where we felt limited. And he's like, and now there's not really a place for me in the world, because, one, it's almost like men have been taught, even more so out here, that you're not supposed to share those things, or there's just simply no place where they can do that, right? Because men's ministry's sort of been, hey, show up, watch a video, say a prayer, slap each other on the back, say, see you next week. But where's the place where men are being authentic and being called into accountability and really holding each other accountable? And he said, this is another thing stuck in my mind. He said, a lot of men talk about wanting accountability, but then they resist it when it shows up, that there's a resistance to it. So, yeah, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's your experience, if it was easier for you to find brotherhood there than it is after now. Because, I mean, that's the number one reason for isolation. When there's a poll out there that says 31% of Catholic men don't have one real friend, that's a problem, right? That's an issue. And the world is taught the men that put your head down, work hard, never complain, work on amassing your fortunes and your money, and so you can retire and sit on a beach or whatever you want to do and be taken care of. And again, I think this goes back to the lack in insecurity in God and belief that he's going to provide for us. But I think there's a lot of men that are struggling out there. They're isolated and they're lonely. The number one thing searched for our podcast are despair, loneliness, isolation, father wounds, things like that. And so what would you have to say to all of that?
I think your colleagues that you're referencing, I mean, I think there's accuracy there, right? I mean, there's a shared bond. There's people are going to see you at your best and your worst in the military. And so my closest friends are, without a doubt, are from that time in service. And I think your buddy's not far off either when he's saying it's hard to relate, because part of that is guys, as they get older, become more introverted. They're also incredibly busy, especially 30s, 40s. I mean, you barely have time to do anything other than come home. You're helping with homework, you're dropping kids off at sports practices, it's bath time, there's dishes. Like, you're like, hey, you want to go grab a beer? It's like, no, man, I want to go to bed at like 8:30 p.m. I'm exhausted, and so there's limited time to, like, connect. There's also probably a fallacy there too, where a lot of these guys that are coming out, maybe they served time in the infantry or they were a pilot in the Air Force, what have you, and they're trying to meet with a buddy at a local Catholic event, and they're like, well, what does this accountant or this lawyer know about my experience? And the reality is a lot, because they're a man and they have a lot of shared experiences, but there's that initial buffer, which I think is tough for guys because they're in their own isolated silos and they think that their own sufferings are unique to them or their own shortcomings are unique to them. But as you know, I mean, you've been in ministry a while, man, all that's just a veneer deep. And once that goes away, you realize like, oh my gosh, these guys, you mean that suffering is not unique to me? I'm not the only one that struggles with X, Y, or Z. It's like, no, man. Yeah. Like, that's not unique at all. Like, welcome to the club. Welcome to being a man, And I think the more that we can understand that there's so much of these shared experiences, and that the wolf pack gets stronger by one, the wolf, i.e. the man, staying close to the sacraments, pursuing virtue. The strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. And so you need to have that brotherhood. That's something that I think is underestimated for men that maybe haven't served in the military or some sort of a team formation. Like, having a crew to roll in with, that is not only good for the heart, good for the community to have these strong men united and on mission together, but it's incredibly necessary for men in general. Like, that is how we're designed. Even if you go to these parties, this goes back to caveman time and is still relevant to our time now. It's like guys will gravitate towards each other at these different Christmas parties, different Thanksgiving, bonfires. Guys are like, oh man, how we doing? And the ability to relate, that is how we're designed, bro. And so I think what we're bumping up against is guys prioritizing that. Yeah. Because I think there's a need. It's how do we prioritize that? Because everyone can say, man, I'm busy. Great. That's also true. I get that. But you also have to put it on the calendar.
Sure.
You have to make it a priority.
Yeah, that's what I tell people all the time. Like, I'm going around the country starting men's groups, but I meet with mine every week. I mean, in a couple of days, we'll have a worship night, and I'll be standing shoulder to shoulder with those men. And I was laughing at what you said about the party because, somebody told me once, put two guys face to face and get them to open up, and they won't, but build a campfire right in front of them, and they'll turn and look and tell you all about their life.
Right.
And that's what you're trying. That's what you're trying to do. Is these men's groups is build a place where men can come and kind of look at a campfire and start to get open and get real and to get out of that isolation. Because let's be honest. I mean, and this may be something you've probably dealt with. With people knowing that you were in the teams, but the biggest wound for men is inadequacy. Right? Like that started at the fall where, what is the punishment that God dwells out to Adam? Like, because of this, you will toil by the sweat of your brow to bear fruit. And now most men can finish that sentence as like, it never feels good enough, right? No matter what I do, it never feels good enough, which results in I'm not enough. So there's a lot of men out there, that struggle with that. And I could imagine, like you talked about, the points of a regular everyday guy who's not been in the military versus, guys in the military, like what do we have in common? I would say on the other side, sometimes too, guys who haven't been in the military can also often feel inadequate, right? Because like this guy's seen war and this guy's done he could probably do 3,000 push-ups right now on command, and and men could feel inadequate by that and shame and things like that, So I think you make a good point that no matter where we are and what we've done, again, back to what we talked about early, what you do isn't who you are. That doesn't define you. Like being a SEAL certainly gave you characteristics and was a defining point in your life. But it's just too many people out here say when you go, hey, Sam, who are you? Well, I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm a cop. I'm a this. No one ever says I'm a beloved son of God, which is the one and correct answer. And again, I think that's a ploy of the devil to try to take us away from who we really are and identify with what we do instead of whose we are. But, I can imagine in high performing men, especially guys that would be on SEAL teams and doing all these things, that there's got to be places of shame, like where shame hides in that high performance and even in some of that inadequacy in those places. I said a lot there, so pick your poison about what you want to talk about.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I think that's all well said, and maybe to keep this brief to a point is like I also think a lot of times people will pursue high performing roles or maybe degrees or physical feats to almost fill that void, not because they actually want to climb Mount Everest or because they want to get chemistry PhD from MIT, but because like, oh, my dad will be proud of me, or my community is going to be like, wow, what a stud. They actually don't want to be a chemist, or they're like, I don't really like mountain climbing, but this is the tallest mountain, I'm going to climb it just to show everybody. And I think we are all designed, and I'm off the cuff here, man. I don't have a doctorate in theology, so this may be incorrect, but this is my intuition, is that at the end of the day, we all have that inadequacy, if you want to call it that. I don't want to call it inadequacy. I just want to call it this void, because we are designed for God. And unless we put God first in our lives, we're always going to feel that. And I think there's a lot of nonsense going around right now, like you're enough movement, you're enough. It's like, that's all BS, man. It's like the Lord is our God, and he is enough, not us by ourselves. Like that whole rhetoric also collapses. It's like, what are we teaching? What are we talking about here? And I think we're always going to have that void unless we turn towards the source and summit of life, which is Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, period. I think we're just spinning our wheels unless we can orientate our lives to God. And if you look at the lives of the saints, none of them are free of struggles. None of them are free of the cross. All of them have hardships. But you know what? Each of those saints that I've read about, they're incredibly happy, tired and happy, and they also are fulfilled. I mean, they're at peace. They are here on this side of heaven at peace, because the Lord fulfills every aspect of their life. And I think the more that we can decrease and allow the Lord to increase, the happier and more peaceful we're going to become in life.
Yeah, well said. And it's so funny because as I'm thinking about everything we've talked about here, it just, I didn't know what we're going to talk about. You and I just said, let's do a show together and see where the heck it goes. And you've been so great and so open to share about your own vulnerabilities, the only places that you've struggled, and what life was like after the military. But I think ultimately, like you're saying, the saints were at peace because they understood who they were in relation to God, right? And you can be a whole lot more peaceful when you're not sitting around worrying. Because what comes with self-reliance? What comes with, like, do I depend on myself or do I depend on God? If I'm depending on myself, everything's on me, which comes with a lot of stress, a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety, never being able to sit and rest, like with your wife, like you talked about. Like, I've got to be doing something, right? Because everything is up to me. I have to make this happen. I have to produce. I have to make sure my life is what it should be. And God's kind of sitting there on the horizon, right near you, right next to you, going like, you really don't. You really just have to look at me. You just have to look at me. And this is the age-long struggle that I think every man's going to have. And that you've said so beautifully here is like, there was that struggle in the military. There's been that struggle after the military. There's that struggle in my life now. There's always going to be this battle of who am I going to choose to rely on today, myself or God? And I think the beauty of getting older is as we go through things, you start to learn. And if nobody wants to keep hitting their thumb with a hammer, right? So you start to learn not to have your thumb in the way. So you're trying to go like, okay, where do I not put my thumb in the way today and give God the hammer, right? And this is something I think we're all going to struggle with throughout our life, but that's a good thing because it's in the struggles, as you well know, I'm sure, in the military, the struggles are what makes you stronger. If you come out the other side with the knowledge of the things that happened there and what you can learn from it and how you can be better on the next time. Yeah.
As you're saying that too, I think there's also just a natural progression of life too, where, especially for guys, whether we like it or not, guys can fight this with testosterone injection, but testosterone wanes off. We
Yeah.
do get older, our strength wanes, like all sort, like we get old. And then getting
Right.
old too, we can no longer white knuckle life. So whether we want to learn the lesson now in the height of our strength, or when we're 90, I guess up to us, but it's an individual journey. But there's an element, the Lord will get your attention. He will
Yeah.
get your attention one way or another if you want. And in that moment, you get to again decide. Like, your bishop can't decide for you, your parish priest can't decide for you, your wife can't decide for you. Like, you actually have to choose to surrender to the Lord and realize that He's God and you're not. And that sounds, it's like, well, of course, there's an easy answer. He's God. But if that is true, if we actually believe that, then our actions would follow suit. And that is telling of how we actually approach that decision. And that's an everyday decision, man, in the big and the small things.
Yeah, and it brings you to humility, right? You don't surrender
Yeah.
unless you have some degree of humility. It's like if I'm on a battlefield and I'm surrounded with 20 guys with machine guns and I've got a pistol with one bullet, it's like you got to have the humility to realize maybe I'm not going to win this one, right? Like maybe I'm not going to surrender might be my option here. And to me, that happened in that jail cell. Like I just, I got arrested on the verge of losing everything in my life. How did I get here? God showed up pretty quickly and said, well, the day you walked away from me, when you decided that you didn't need me and you could be in control of your own life. And in my mercy, I brought you here in the hopes that you'll look at me and realize that the only way forward is with me, right? And in that jail cell, those were the two words I finished a from the heart sobbing prayer, was, God, I'm sorry for being this way. I didn't mean to be this way. All I want to be is the man I should have been for my wife and kids. And then the final two words were like, I don't want to be in control anymore. I surrender. Like I surrender. And everything in my life changed with those words. And, it sounds like a cookie cutter fairy tale to a lot of people, but I mean, that's really where the road shifts, where your life shifts, is when you say that to God and you actually mean it. And so it's just been such a beautiful conversation today. And Sam, I know you got some things to get to here in a minute, but before we jump off, I'd love to just do a couple things. One, just a couple questions you could answer quickly if you want, or however you like. But like one, what would you say to a man sitting in the pew, like feeling like, he may be feeling now, as we know what we've talked about, a lot of men are feeling in the world right now, maybe alone, isolated, self-reliant, trying to white knuckle life. What's one uncomfortable step every guy's got to take? And, where do you think real change begins?
Yeah. I think going back full circle, right? If you are feeling those emotions of sadness or depression or isolation, emotions are incredibly helpful because they actually bring up a reality. And so in that reality, it's like, well, why are you sad? Why are you depressed? Why do you feel isolated? And oftentimes, as guys, we can either do two things. We can push those emotions down and keep trying to trudge through life, or we can look at it, which takes courage, and be like, okay, well, why am I feeling this way? And then make appropriate steps, to say, okay, I'm sad because maybe I haven't been to confession in a while. I'm sad because I'm impatient with my kids. Why am I impatient with my kids? You can start unraveling all of that to just look at it with courage and then take the next steps towards healing, which you cannot heal yourself, by the way, just to make that clear. So it's like, okay, journeying back to the Lord. And I think, can you help me on, you asked me a second question.
Yeah. What's a uncomfortable step that every guy's got to take, that moving forward?
I think that is an uncomfortable step, right? Is to look at things, and not just look at them to shove them back down again, but to look at them and say, okay, how can this be better? And I don't want to give away the book answer, but it's the right answer. It's like, it'll be better with Jesus. Will you become a millionaire overnight? Will you have a thriving marriage overnight? No, but it's a step towards holiness. And here's the other thing, man, is like, just because you've surrendered to the Lord, you could become a billionaire, and you could also end up in a gulag. Like, at the end of the day, the Lord is going to do what's best for you to enter heaven. You brought up St. Padre Pio in the beginning of the episode. There's this great story of St. Padre Pio, and he was the Lord used him in a mighty way for healing. And one guy came to him in a wheelchair, in Italy, and Padre Pio heard his confession. He said, your sins are forgiven. He said, but I thought you were going to heal my legs. He's like, yeah, I could heal, like Lord can heal your legs, but he's not going to, because he knows that if your legs are healed, you will not stay on path to heaven. And I just remember reading that, like, what? But there's an element where I think like you had brought up, Paul with the thorn aside, some things will keep us humble because it keeps us dependent on the Lord, and he knows that, he knows our tendencies, he knows our weaknesses, he knows our strengths, he knows our gifts, because he's given all of them to us, they're all his. And he wants to keep us, he wants his children happy, and he wants his children close to him. And I think that takes courage to wrestle with, like, wait, you have plans for my welfare, not my woe, and you want the best for me. And I think when we encounter suffering, like, well, this isn't best. And what we fail to realize is the cross is the key that unlocks heaven. Suffering is part of this journey. We can't avoid it this side of heaven. And the human tendency is to avoid suffering and move towards gain. The Christian is the opposite. It's like you want to embrace the cross, because that cross leads us on a straight and narrow path to heaven.
Yeah, there's one of the saints, I don't remember who, but their prayer is like, Lord, I know I'm going to have to suffer, and let me suffer well. And just embrace it the way that he did. Those are beautiful answers, man. And you made me think of I don't know if you watched The Chosen or not, but there's one of the seasons where little James comes up who's got some kind of disability, and he starts to ask Jesus why he hasn't healed him, and he starts to cry and get upset about it. And Jesus is like, I could heal you, and I could do that right now. But how many more people would be brought to our Father when they see you, who could be healed and who is not, still moving forward and preaching healing and repentance and restoration? And he's like, there will be a day when you'll leap like a deer, and he's like, and I just ask you to suffer along with me. And I remember, like, man, getting teary-eyed in that scene and just going like, dude, what a beautiful, beautiful image that they came up with in this show, even though they're dramatizing, a lot of it. But, like, what a beautiful message that inherently is Catholic, right? Like, we're all given our crosses, and part of me, what it means to me to be a man is how we handle those things, how we deal with those things. Are we going to shirk them and complain and, Lord, I don't have what they have, or I didn't get what they got? Or are we going to have, open hands in a place of receptivity and gratitude for whatever comes our way, whether it's difficulty, which is certainly hard to deal with. It was hard to find out the news about my dad. I've talked about it on the show, but I have two choices. I could be mad at God and walk away from my faith, which is going to get me absolutely nowhere and not help my dad at all. Or I can say, you know what, God, I don't understand this, but you know all things, you're good in all things. And in Romans 8:28, like, all things work out for good for those who love you. And so I have to believe that and move forward. And I think that's an invitation for all men. Sam, I appreciate this, because I'm sure there's a lot of guys that probably clicked on this or were like, all right, what are we talking about? The machine guns and the grenades and the deployments and how hard it was in Buds and how much seawater you threw up and all that stuff. But, like, that's all good, and I'm sure they could find it somewhere else. But what I know about you just from the times we spent together, there's so much more to you than that. And I really appreciate you being open today and vulnerable and sharing and being honest about some of your own difficulties, because I think that's what inspires men to do the same. That vulnerability, witness through someone, especially someone who's been through the wonderful things and just amazing things that you've done and accomplished with your life, that you can still be open and honest about the difficulties in that and the transitions and things like that. Give people hope. So thank you for doing that here today.
Oh, man, it's been an honor being on here with you, John. And thank you for the mission you're doing. And keep up the great work, man. You're in my prayers.
Yeah, thank you. All right, before we go, you speak. I know you're speaking at men's conferences and doing things like that. Is there somewhere they can go for anybody who's listened to you and may want to invite you in for a parish talk or a men's conference or something? Where can they go to do that?
Yeah, I don't have a website or anything for that. We have a couple buddies and I at our parish have a podcast called the Point Man Podcast, and there's a website there that maybe they can send something, a message that way. But otherwise, I guess LinkedIn.
Okay. All right. So, guys, you heard that. He's got a podcast. His buddies is Parish. What was the name of it again, Sam?
Called the Point Man Podcast.
The Point Man Podcast. So check that out. And also, he's on LinkedIn, Sam Blair. You can look at it and find him there. And if you want him to come speak at your men's conference or Parish, you can get in touch with him there to do it. Sam, again, thanks for your time, man. I know you're super busy. It's such a joy to have you on here. I've been waiting to do this for a long time, and just really enjoyed being with you. So thank you for being here.
Man, it's been an honor. Thank you so much, John.
All right. God bless.
God bless you too.